You think dessert meant just cake and ice cream from the store? Think again. These working-class homes across suburban developments and factory towns served up some of the most elaborate, time-intensive, and surprisingly competitive sweets in American history.
Well, to them it's a special occasion, as it has been ever since they sat down to dinner in high chairs.
They're real desserts made by real families in dining rooms with cut-glass serving bowls and church basement kitchens from 1960 through 1979. Let's dig into 30 forgotten desserts you never knew were actually keeping hostesses competitive when every dinner party, potluck, and bridge club meeting required proof you understood modern homemaking. Baked Alaska was the showpiece dessert every ambitious hostess attempted once in 1965 before deciding it was too stressful to repeat. She started with a layer of pound cake, topped it with a brick of Neapolitan ice cream from the grocery store freezer, covered the entire thing with stiff meringue beaten until her arm ached, and browned it under the broiler for exactly 3 minutes. The timing was critical. Long enough to toast the meringue peaks golden brown, short enough that the ice cream stayed frozen solid inside its insulated shell. The presentation was pure dinner party drama. Bringing a flaming dessert to the table meant you'd mastered advanced techniques most women only read about in magazines. It served 8 people for around $3 and required perfect timing, steady nerves, and an oven that held accurate temperature. Tunnel of Fudge Cake won the 1966 Pillsbury Bake-Off, and suddenly every woman in America needed the specific bundt pan to make it properly. Your aunt bought the pan for $2.49 at the hardware store, mixed butter, sugar, eggs, flour, and an entire box of Pillsbury Double Dutch Fudge Buttercream Frosting Mix into the batter. That mix was the secret ingredient that created the fudgy tunnel center during baking. It baked 45 minutes at 350 degrees, and the house smelled like chocolate factory output. When she turned it out onto the serving plate, the center stayed deliberately underbaked and fudgy, while the outside formed a proper cake structure. Slicing it revealed that glossy chocolate tunnel that made guests ask for the recipe immediately. Tunnel of Fudge Cake disappeared when Pillsbury discontinued that specific frosting mix, and the recipe stopped working with substitute ingredients. Watergate cake appeared in 1975 and had nothing to do with the political scandal except timing and mysterious green color. Your mother mixed 1 box of white cake mix, 1 box of Jell-O pistachio instant pudding, 4 eggs, 1 cup of oil, 1 cup of 7-Up soda, and half a cup of chopped nuts. The batter turned pale green from the pudding mix, and it baked in a 9 by 13 pan for 45 minutes at 350 degrees. The frosting was Cool Whip, folded with more pistachio pudding and coconut, pure 1970s engineering that required no cooking skills beyond folding ingredients together. The cake stayed incredibly moist for days because of the oil and soda, and that artificial pistachio flavor tasted nothing like actual pistachios, but everything like modern convenience. Ambrosia salad owned every 1960s holiday table, even though nobody could agree whether it was salad or dessert. Your grandmother mixed canned mandarin oranges, canned pineapple chunks, miniature marshmallows, shredded coconut, maraschino cherries, and sour cream in a cut glass bowl that lived in the china cabinet 50 weeks per year. She made it the night before so the marshmallows could soften and the flavors could marry in the refrigerator. The result was sweet and tangy with chewy coconut and soft marshmallows suspended in thick sour cream. Jell-O 123. Dessert was pure food science marketed to housewives in 1969, 1 package that magically separated into 3 distinct layers during refrigeration. Your mother dissolved the powder in boiling water, added cold water and ice cubes, whipped it with an electric mixer for exactly 2 minutes, poured it into dessert cups, and refrigerated it 4 hours. The bottom layer was clear Jell-O, the middle was creamy mousse, the top was airy foam. All from one powder packet through molecular magic nobody understood or questioned. It came in strawberry, orange, and lemon flavors, and children loved watching the layers form through clear glass cups. It served 6 people for 39 cents and required only water, ice, and patience. Every mother kept boxes in the pantry for emergency desserts. Jell-O 123. Dessert disappeared when the formula was discontinued in the 1980s, and nobody could replicate it at home despite numerous attempts. The dessert that once demonstrated modern food technology and scientific progress became nostalgic memory, something people described to younger generations who couldn't believe one powder created 3 separate textures automatically. These desserts weren't just sweet endings to meals. They were status competitions played out in church basements and dining rooms. Every layered Jell-O mold, every meringue-covered ice cream bomb, every cake made with convenience mixes proved a woman understood modern homemaking. The time invested, the techniques mastered, the perfect presentation, all of it mattered in ways that seem absurd now, but were deadly serious then. Dessert wasn't optional, it was evidence. Chiffon pie was the sophisticated cousin of regular cream pies, lighter, airier, more elegant for company. Your aunt made it with a graham cracker crust, a filling of egg yolks cooked with lemon juice and gelatin, then folded in stiffly beaten egg whites that made it cloud-like. It set in the refrigerator 4 hours until firm enough to slice cleanly, but soft enough to feel like eating flavored air. The texture was distinctive, not quite mousse, not quite pie filling, but something that belonged specifically to the 1960s when gelatin-based desserts dominated entertaining. She made it in lemon, chocolate, or pumpkin versions, depending on the season, and it served 8 people for under $2 while looking like bakery-quality work. Chiffon pie disappeared when raw egg whites became food safety concerns and gelatin-based desserts became old-fashioned instead of elegant. The pie that once proved a hostess understood French-inspired techniques and modern convenience became risky, something food safety experts warned against making, and younger generations never learned to appreciate or recognize as legitimate dessert category. Grasshopper pie was every 1970s dinner party finale, a chocolate cookie crust filled with bright green crème de menthe mousse that tasted like melted Andes mints. Your mother crushed Oreo cookies, mixed them with melted butter for the crust, made filling with marshmallows melted in milk, added green crème de menthe liqueur and white crème de cacao, then folded in whipped cream until it was pale mint green and fluffy. It set in the freezer overnight, and slicing revealed that shocking green interior against the dark chocolate crust. Pure 1970s color theory that valued visual impact over natural appearance. It served 10 people for around $3 and proved the hostess was sophisticated enough to use alcohol in desserts. Grasshopper pie disappeared when green food became unappetizing and artificially colored desserts became suspect rather than festive. The pie that once signaled elegant adult entertaining became garish, and the crème de menthe bottles gathered dust in liquor cabinets until people threw them away during moves. Icebox cake was the easiest impressive dessert in 1965, alternating layers of chocolate wafer cookies and whipped cream left overnight in the refrigerator. Your grandmother bought Nabisco-famous chocolate wafers, whipped heavy cream with sugar and vanilla, spread thin layers between cookies, stacked them into a log shape, covered the outside with more whipped cream, and refrigerated it 12 hours. The cookies absorbed moisture from the cream and softened into cake-like texture, while the cream stayed stable. Slicing it on the diagonal created striped pieces that looked bakery-made, despite requiring 0 baking. It served 8 people for under $2 and needed only 3 ingredients and patience. The cake that once demonstrated clever shortcuts and advanced planning became evidence of not caring enough to bake from scratch. despite its legitimate historical culinary category. Lemon snow pudding was Victorian cooking that survived into the space age. Beaten egg whites folded into lemon gelatin until it was cloud white and impossibly light. Your aunt dissolved lemon Jell-O in boiling water, let it cool until syrupy but not set, then beat egg whites until stiff and folded the two together. The mixture went into a fancy mold and set in the refrigerator 4 hours. She served it with custard sauce made from the leftover egg yolks. The pudding was tart and airy, the sauce was rich and sweet, and the combination proved she understood classical technique even while using modern convenience products. It served 6 people for under $1 and looked elegant enough for special occasions. Lemon snow pudding disappeared when raw egg whites became health risks, and gelatin desserts became grandmother food instead of elegant entertaining. The pudding that once demonstrated a woman's ability to bridge Victorian refinement and modern efficiency became forgotten, something that existed in old cookbooks but never on actual tables anymore. Pineapple. Upside-down cake was cast-iron skillet artistry. Your mother melted butter and brown sugar in the skillet, arranged canned pineapple rings in geometric patterns with maraschino cherries in the centers, poured yellow cake batter over everything, and baked it 45 minutes at 350 degrees. Flipping it onto a serving plate revealed glossy, caramelized fruit in perfect circles that looked magazine-ready. The cake was buttery and dense. The pineapple was sweet-tart with caramelized edges, and those bright red cherries proved someone cared about presentation. It served 8 people for around $2 and transformed a simple cake mix into something that looked handmade and thoughtful. Pineapple. Upside-down cake disappeared when cast-iron skillets became vintage cookware instead of daily tools, and maraschino cherries became artificial ingredients to avoid. The cake that once demonstrated a woman's ability to create beauty from simple ingredients became retro, something served at diners for nostalgia value rather than home kitchens where people actually wanted to impress guests with current rather than dated desserts. By the mid-1970s, these desserts had become tests of a woman's value as a homemaker. The perfectionism required gelatin that set at exactly the right consistency, meringue that didn't weep, layers that stayed distinct, was judged by other women who understood what could go wrong. Every church potluck, every dinner party, every holiday meal was a referendum on competence. These desserts weren't just food. They were performance reviews conducted through sugar and gelatin. Junket custard was milk set with rennet tablets into impossibly delicate custard that broke if you looked at it wrong. Your grandmother heated milk with sugar to lukewarm, exactly 110 degrees measured with a thermometer, dissolved a junket rennet tablet in cold water, stirred it in quickly, poured it into dessert cups, and left them completely undisturbed for 15 minutes while it set. Moving them too soon meant the custard broke into watery curds. The result was silkier than any baked custard, barely sweet, fragile enough that you ate it with the smallest spoon you owned. She topped it with fruit or a sprinkle of nutmeg, and it served 6 people for under $1. It was invalid food, baby food, gentle food that belonged to an earlier century. Junket custard disappeared when rennet tablets vanished from grocery stores, and nobody under 70 remembered what they were for or why anyone would use them. The custard that once demonstrated delicate technique and patient hands became extinct, something that couldn't be made anymore, even by people who remembered eating it. Charlotte Russe was French bakery elegance recreated at home, ladyfinger cookies lining a springform pan filled with Bavarian cream, chilled until set. Your aunt bought packaged ladyfingers, made custard from egg yolks and milk, dissolved gelatin in the warm custard, let it cool until syrupy, then folded in whipped cream. She arranged the lady fingers, standing upright around the pan edges, poured the cream in the center, refrigerated it overnight. Releasing the springform pan revealed a dessert that looked professionally constructed. The lady fingers formed elegant walls, the cream was pale yellow and smooth, and slicing it proved she'd mastered advanced assembly techniques. It served 10 people for around $3 and required multiple steps, precise timing, and confidence. Charlotte Russe disappeared when elaborate molded desserts became impractical and French-inspired recipes became intimidating rather than aspirational. The dessert that once demonstrated a woman's ambition and skill level became forgotten, something that existed in vintage cookbooks but seemed too complicated and old-fashioned for anyone to attempt when simpler options from bakeries delivered similar elegance without the anxiety. Floating Island was pure French technique, poached meringue clouds floating on vanilla custard that required constant stirring and perfect temperature control. Your grandmother beat egg whites with sugar until they formed stiff peaks, shaped them into egg-sized ovals with 2 spoons, poached them in barely simmering milk for exactly 3 minutes per side, then made custard from the leftover milk and egg yolks that couldn't curdle, or she'd have to start completely over. The meringues floated on top of the custard like clouds on golden liquid, and the whole presentation proved she'd mastered techniques most women only read about. It served 6 people for around $1, but required an entire afternoon and nerves steady enough for the delicate temperature management. Floating Island disappeared when elaborate French desserts became unrealistic for working women and the risk of failure, curdled custard, weeping meringue, collapsed whites, became unacceptable stress. The dessert that once proved exceptional skill and classical training became extinct, something even fancy restaurants stopped making because customers preferred simpler options that didn't require 3-hour preparation from trained pastry chefs. Spoonbread pudding was a southern dessert bread pudding hybrid. Cornmeal, milk, eggs, and sugar baked until it was creamy inside with a golden top. Your grandmother mixed white cornmeal with boiling milk, let it cool, beat in egg yolks and sugar, folded in stiffly beaten egg whites, and baked it in a buttered dish for 45 minutes at 375 degrees. It came out puffy and soufflé-like, and you had to serve it immediately before it deflated. The texture was somewhere between cornbread and pudding, slightly grainy from the cornmeal, custardy from the eggs, sweet enough for dessert but not cloying. She served it warm with butter melting on top or cold with fruit, and it fed 8 people for under $1, using ingredients she kept in the pantry constantly. Spoonbread pudding disappeared when Southern cooking became regionalized and cornmeal in desserts became confusing to people outside the South. The pudding that once demonstrated resourcefulness, transforming cornmeal into something delicate, became obscure, something only elderly Southern women still made and nobody else recognized as legitimate dessert category. Strawberry. Pretzel salad appeared at every 1970s potluck, despite being neither salad nor containing actual pretzel flavor. It was layered dessert with crushed pretzels, cream cheese, and strawberry Jell-O. Your aunt crushed pretzels and mixed them with butter and sugar for a crust, spread cream cheese mixed with Cool Whip and sugar for the middle layer, topped it with strawberry Jell-O mixed with frozen strawberries that set into the final layer. The 3 layers stayed distinct if she let each one set properly before adding the next, and the sweet-salty combination from the pretzel crust made it memorable. It served 12 people from a 9x13 pan for around $2 and always disappeared first at gatherings because the combination of textures, crunchy, creamy, jiggly, felt modern and fun. Strawberry pretzel salad disappeared when calling desserts salad became dishonest, and Cool Whip became ingredient non grata among food purists. The dessert that once proved a hostess understood current trends and crowd-pleasing combinations became joke food, something served ironically at potlucks rather than taken seriously as legitimate contribution to meal. These elaborate desserts revealed something contemporary culture forgets: the intense competition between women who had limited outlets for ambition and creativity. When career advancement was restricted and domestic success was the primary measure of worth, these desserts became battlegrounds. The woman who brought store-bought cookies admitted defeat. The woman whose Jell-O mold didn't unmold cleanly felt genuine shame. The stakes seem trivial now. They weren't trivial then. Bavarian cream was French pastry shop elegance requiring precision and patience. Custard enriched with gelatin and lightened with whipped cream. Your aunt made custard from egg yolks, milk, and sugar that couldn't curdle, dissolved gelatin in the warm custard, let it cool until it started thickening, then folded in whipped cream beaten to soft peaks. She poured it into a decorative mold and refrigerated it overnight. Unmolding it required dipping the mold in warm water for exactly 5 seconds. Too short, and it stayed stuck. Too long, and the exterior started melting. When successful, it revealed glossy cream molded into elaborate shapes that wobbled elegantly on the serving plate. It served 8 people for around $2 and proved mastery of French technique. Bavarian cream disappeared when molded desserts became old-fashioned, and the risk of failed unmolding became unacceptable for important occasions. The cream that once demonstrated a woman's understanding of classical pastry technique became impractical, something that required too much anxiety and expertise when bakeries sold similar items without the stress of home preparation. Chocolate ripple cake was Australian import that became American party dessert. Chocolate cookies layered with whipped cream into a log that softened overnight into cake. Your mother bought Nabisco chocolate wafers, whipped heavy cream with cocoa powder and sugar, spread it between cookies standing on edge, built a long log, covered the outside with chocolate whipped cream, refrigerated it overnight. The cookies absorbed moisture and softened into cake layers separated by cream. Slicing it on the diagonal created striped pieces with ribbon effect that looked professionally decorated. It served 10 people for under $3 and required no baking, no mixing bowls, no technical skills beyond whipping cream and patience. Every Australian cookbook included it, and American women adopted it enthusiastically. Chocolate ripple cake disappeared when the specific Australian chocolate cookies became hard to find in American stores, and nobody knew what to substitute successfully. The cake that once provided international sophistication and easy entertaining became forgotten, something Australian immigrants remembered eating, but American women stopped making when ingredient access changed. Cherry Delight was church potluck essential, graham cracker crust topped with sweetened cream cheese and canned cherry pie filling. Your grandmother crushed graham crackers, mixed them with melted butter and sugar, pressed them into a 9-by-13 pan for the base. She beat cream cheese with powdered sugar and Cool Whip until fluffy, spread it over the crust, topped it with cherry pie, filling straight from the can, refrigerated it until serving time. The 3 layers stayed distinct: crunchy crust, creamy middle, glossy fruit top, and it cut into perfect squares that held their shape. It served 12 people for under $3 and required 0 baking or cooking, just assembly and refrigeration. Every church lady had the recipe memorized. Lemon icebox pie was Southern summer essential: graham cracker crust filled with sweetened condensed milk and lemon juice that thickened without baking. Your aunt mixed condensed milk with egg yolks and fresh lemon juice, watched it thicken from the acid reaction within minutes, poured it into a graham cracker crust, topped it with meringue beaten from the egg whites, and browned the meringue under the broiler for exactly 3 minutes. The filling was intensely tart-sweet, The meringue was cloud-like with toasted peaks, and the whole pie stayed cold from refrigeration. It served 8 people for under $2 and provided impressive results without turning on the oven during summer heat. Every Southern woman knew the ratio by heart. 1 can condensed milk, 3 egg yolks, ½ cup lemon juice. Divinity candy was pure Southern skill test, egg whites and hot sugar syrup beaten together until they formed glossy white peaks that held their shape. Your grandmother boiled sugar, corn syrup, and water to exactly 260 degrees on a candy thermometer, poured it in thin stream into stiffly beaten egg whites while beating constantly with electric mixer. Continued beating until the mixture lost its gloss and held soft peaks. Dropped spoonfuls onto waxed paper before it hardened in the bowl. It was temperamental. Humidity ruined it. Wrong temperature ruined it. Beating too long or not long enough ruined it. When successful, it was cloud white, melt-in-your-mouth sweet with slightly chewy texture. It proved a woman understood candy-making science and had the experience to judge doneness without relying entirely on thermometers. The technical expertise required for these desserts is easy to underestimate. Knowing when gelatin was ready for whipped cream, understanding how humidity affected candy making, judging meringue peaks without visual guides, these were genuine skills learned through repeated failure. Modern recipes provide photographs and exact measurements. These women worked from vague instructions and intuition developed over years. When their desserts failed, it reflected on their competence as women, not just their baking skills. Fruit cocktail cake was Depression-era resourcefulness surviving into prosperity. 1 can of fruit cocktail with its syrup mixed directly into yellow cake batter. Your mother combined cake flour, sugar, eggs, baking soda, and 1 undrained can of Del Monte fruit cocktail, poured it into a 9 by 13 pan, baked it 45 minutes at 350 degrees. The fruit distributed throughout the cake, adding moisture and natural sweetness. She served it warm with brown sugar butter sauce made by boiling butter, brown sugar, and evaporated milk until it thickened, or cold with whipped cream. It fed 12 people for under $2 using 1 can of fruit that cost 35 cents. The cake stayed moist for days because of the fruit syrup. Tapioca Supreme was pearl tapioca, cooked in milk until translucent, sweetened with sugar, enriched with egg yolks, lightened with beaten egg whites, folded in at the end. Your grandmother soaked pearl tapioca overnight, cooked it slowly in milk until the pearls turned from opaque white to translucent, and the mixture thickened, stirred in beaten egg yolks and sugar, folded in stiffly beaten egg whites off the heat. The result was creamy with distinctive tapioca pearls, providing textural interest that children either loved or called fish eyes and refused to eat. She served it warm or cold with fruit on top, and it fed 6 people for under $1 using pantry staples. It was comfort pudding that required patience and constant stirring. Mock apple pie was depression trick that survived as novelty, pie filling made from Ritz crackers instead of apples that supposedly tasted identical. Your mother made pastry crust, broke Ritz crackers into pieces, mixed them with sugar, cinnamon, and lemon juice, baked it 45 minutes, and challenged guests to identify the filling. The crackers softened and absorbed the liquid, creating texture similar to cooked apples if you didn't look too closely or think too hard. Nabisco printed the recipe on the box, and it became party trick dessert. Can you guess what's in this? It served 8 people for around $1.50 and proved a woman understood clever substitutions and food science. Some people genuinely couldn't tell the difference. Others found it obviously fake, but appreciated the creativity. Whipped pineapple dessert was refrigerator dessert made with crushed pineapple, lemon Jell-O, and evaporated milk, whipped to double its volume. Your aunt dissolved lemon Jell-O in boiling water, added crushed pineapple with its juice, Let it chill until syrupy. Meanwhile, she chilled evaporated milk in ice cube trays until ice crystals formed around the edges, then whipped it until it doubled in volume and formed soft peaks. She folded the two mixtures together and refrigerated it in a mold until set. The result was impossibly light and fluffy, pale yellow, sweet tart from the pineapple and lemon combination. It served 8 people for under $1 and demonstrated knowledge of evaporated milk's whipping properties, a trick that required precise chilling temperature and immediate use before the milk deflated. 7-layer Jell-O was time commitment bordering on obsession. 7 different colored Jell-O layers that each needed to set before adding the next. Your grandmother made 1 package of Jell-O, poured a thin layer in a 9 by 13 pan, refrigerated it until firm, made the next color, poured it carefully over the set layer, refrigerated it again, repeated the process 7 times over 2 days. The final result displayed rainbow stripes when cut into squares. It served 16 people and required almost no skill but tremendous patience. Each layer needed 45 minutes to set before the next could be added. It proved a woman had time, planning ability, and dedication to creating something purely decorative. Children loved the rainbow effect and the jiggly texture. These time-intensive desserts reveal something about the era's expectations. Women were supposed to have unlimited time for food preparation while simultaneously managing households, raising children, and increasingly working outside the home. The contradiction was crushing, but nobody acknowledged it. Instead, magazines showed perfect gelatin molds and assumed every woman had 2-day stretches to make layered desserts. The pressure to perform domestic perfection while everything else shifted created impossible standards. Brown Betty was colonial-era dessert, surviving through sheer simplicity. Layers of breadcrumbs, sliced apples, butter, and spices, baked until the apples softened and the crumbs crisped. Your grandmother made it with white bread dried and crushed, apples peeled and sliced thin, butter cut into small pieces, sugar and cinnamon mixed together. She layered them in a buttered baking dish. Crumbs, apples, butter, sugar, repeated, and baked it covered for 30 minutes, then uncovered for 15 more until the top browned. It came out bubbly with soft apples and crunchy topping, and she served it warm with heavy cream or vanilla ice cream. It fed 6 people for under $1 using bread that was going stale and apples from the tree in the backyard. It was humble food that tasted better than its simple ingredients suggested. Peach Melba was French chef Auguste Escoffier's creation that American women simplified, vanilla ice cream topped with poached peach halves and raspberry sauce. Your aunt made it for fancy dinner parties by poaching canned peach halves in their syrup with vanilla extract, making raspberry sauce from frozen raspberries cooked with sugar and strained to remove seeds, assembling it at the last minute so the ice cream wouldn't melt. Each dessert dish got a scoop of ice cream, 1 peach half, glossy red sauce drizzled over top. It looked elegant and tasted sophisticated. Cold ice cream, soft sweet peaches, tart raspberry sauce creating flavor layers. It served 8 people for around $3 and required minimal cooking but perfect timing and presentation skills. Serving it proved a hostess understood French culinary history and classical dessert composition. Coconut snowballs were cake scraps transformed into elegant petit fours, leftover cake crumbled and mixed with frosting, rolled into balls, covered with sweetened shredded coconut. Your grandmother made them after baking layer cakes, using the trimmed edges and broken pieces that weren't pretty enough for serving. She mixed the cake crumbs with enough frosting to hold them together, rolled them into walnut-sized balls, rolled each one in sweetened coconut until completely coated white. They looked like actual snowballs, pure white, round, tempting, and one bite revealed moist cake inside the coconut coating. She served them at teas and bridge clubs on paper doilies, and they proved she wasted nothing and could create something elegant from scraps. They cost almost nothing since they used cake that would otherwise be discarded. Frosted ribbon loaf was architectural showpiece, alternating layers of white and chocolate cake trimmed into rectangles and stacked with frosting between, the entire loaf covered in more frosting. Your aunt baked one white layer cake and one chocolate layer cake, trimmed them into even rectangles using a ruler and sharp knife, cut each layer horizontally to make 4 thin layers total, stacked them alternating colors with frosting between each layer, one crooked layer, and the whole structure tilted visibly. Cream. Cheese snow dessert was refrigerator dessert made with cream cheese, and cheese made it richer than plain Jell-O desserts. The whipped milk made it lighter. The pineapple added texture and tartness. Folding ingredients without deflating, unmolding successfully.